The lecture hall of the Galactic Academy of Survival Sciences smelled like ozone and rust, the universal scent of 32 alien species packed into one climate-controlled room. Holographic star maps rotated lazily above each desk. Creature profiles blinked on screens. And at the front of it all stood Instructor Kale, his long silver fingers folded behind his back, his four pale eyes scanning the student roster with the practiced boredom of a being who had taught this course 1,100 times. He was Velhari, a species evolved on a garden world so safe that their concept of danger was a mildly aggressive pollinator. They had compensated for this biological softness with technology so advanced they had mapped every apex predator in the known galaxy before humans had invented agriculture. Kale considered himself an expert on survival. He considered himself, in fact, the expert. Which was why, when he reached the name on the roster that read Ava, Sol 3, human, he allowed himself a very small, very professional sigh. Before we begin today's practical assessment, Kale announced, his translator implant smoothing his words into 32 languages simultaneously, I want to address a misconception several of you may carry. He pulled up a holographic chart, a branching tree of galactic species ranked by hunting capability. Humans sat near the bottom third. Humans, he said, with the careful neutrality of someone who had been sued for species discrimination twice, are persistence predators. Endurance-based. Effective, in a narrow ecological window, on their homeworld. He clicked to the next slide. Outside that window, however, their biological profile is unremarkable. No enhanced senses. No natural armor. No venom. No claws to speak of. He paused. The practical assignment this semester requires each student to spend 72 hours alone in the Crucible, Sector 9's unmanaged wilderness zone, and return with documented proof of a successful hunt. Most species bring back something in the lower predator tiers. He looked directly at Ava. Humans are encouraged to attempt prey rated Class 2 or below. For safety. Ava, sitting third row, dead center, wearing a faded jacket with a patch on the shoulder that said Earth Search and Rescue, looked up from the knife she was quietly sharpening under the desk. What's the record? She asked. Kale blinked two of his four eyes. Pardon? The record. Highest class prey ever brought back from the Crucible. What is it? A murmur rippled through the room. Kale straightened. A student from the Doric clan returned with evidence of a Class 6 Thornmaw 3 years ago. It remains the Academy record. Ava nodded slowly. She looked back down at her knife. Cool, she said, and said nothing else. 72 hours later, the tracking beacon in the Crucible pinged Ava's return. Kale was in his office grading habitat assessment reports when the alert came through. He almost ignored it. Humans returned early sometimes, usually after a humbling encounter with something that outpaced them. He pulled up the perimeter camera feeds out of mild curiosity. What he saw made him stand up so fast he knocked his chair into the wall. Ava was walking out of the treeline at the edge of the Crucible's eastern boundary. She was muddy from the waist down. There was a long shallow cut along her left forearm, sealed with field medical tape. Her jacket was torn at the shoulder. She was chewing something, dried protein ration, probably, with the casual energy of someone returning from a slightly inconvenient commute. Behind her, moving with rigid, humiliated reluctance, were three creatures. The first was a Crucible razorback, a Class 5 ambush predator, six-limbed, with a hide like laminated stone and a bite force that could shear through hull-grade composite plating. It moved with its head low. Its kill ridge was folded flat in the posture that every xenobiology textbook described as active submission. Kale had seen images of razorbacks in submission before. Only in images. Never in field footage. The second creature was worse. It was a Velt Spectre, Class 7. Kale's breath caught. Class 7. The Velt Spectre was an ambush hunter so effective it had been reclassified twice because scientists kept underestimating it. It was partially transparent, thermoregulated, and possessed 3 separate attack patterns that operated in sequential escalation. The Academy's advisory board had placed the Crucible Spectres on the Do Not Engage advisory list for all students. The Spectre was walking 3 paces behind Ava with its camouflage fully deactivated, a posture of total exposure, which in Spectre behavioral language meant I am not a threat and I would like everyone to know that. The third was the reason Kale's office door alarm triggered automatically, because it registered on the external BIOS scan array and sent an alert to the Academy Security Division simultaneously. It was a null hound. Class 9. There were 11 confirmed null hounds in the Crucible. Academy security tracked them the way planetary governments tracked nuclear materials, with constant satellite surveillance, geofencing, and a standing evacuation protocol if one came within 3 kilometers of the perimeter. A null hound averaged 4 meters at the shoulder. It hunted by disrupting the nervous system of prey animals via a biological electromagnetic pulse. Nothing in the Crucible was supposed to be able to stand against a null hound, let alone walk one on an invisible leash made entirely of personal authority. The null hound was walking with its ears flat and its tail low and its massive head angled slightly away from Ava in the body language of an animal that has made a calculated decision that this particular creature is not worth the trouble. Ava stopped at the perimeter gate. She looked up at the camera with the mild, pleasant expression of someone who had completed a moderately interesting weekend project. She held up 3 data chips, field documentation recordings, and waited. Kale met her at the gate himself. He didn't entirely know why. His legs had simply carried him there. She handed him the data chips without ceremony. He turned them over in his fingers, staring past her at the 3 apex predators now sitting at a respectful distance outside the perimeter, looking anywhere except at the small human woman who had apparently decided they were her problem to manage. "How?" Kale said. It was not his most articulate moment. Ava tilted her head, considering the question. "The Razorback ambushed me on hour 4, she said. Came from upwind, which was smart. But it committed too early. I let it charge and sidestepped at about half a meter. They're fast but the attack arc is rigid once they launch. Got behind its kill ridge and stayed there. About 20 minutes of that and it decided I wasn't prey." She glanced back at the Razorback. "They're actually pretty calm once they're not hunting. Kind of curious." Kale looked at the Razorback. The Razorback looked at its own feet. "The Spectre? Hour 19. It hit me with the first phase attack, the neurostatic burst, but I had my signal dampeners on from the null hound recon I'd been doing, so it didn't land clean. When the second phase didn't work either, it broke pattern. They don't have a recovery protocol for prey that doesn't react correctly." She shrugged. "Spent 2 hours just sitting near it. Made noise so it always knew where I was. Ate a ration. Eventually it came and smelled my boot. After that it kept following me, so." "And the null hound," Kale said, and his voice was a little quieter than he intended. Ava was quiet for a moment. "Humans have been living next to things that can kill us for 200,000 years, she said finally. "We didn't survive by being faster or stronger. We survived because we learned to read what an animal is actually saying." She looked at the null hound, enormous, devastating, currently watching a small insect walk across a rock with apparent interest. It wasn't hunting. It was patrolling. Protecting a den. I figured out the den location and started bringing things to the perimeter, salvage from old Crucible test equipment, strong-smelling materials, stuff that reads as marker territory to pack hunters. She paused. "Spent about 40 hours on that. By the time I walked toward it directly on hour 61, it had already categorized me as something in its ecosystem. Not prey. Not threat. Just a thing that exists near the den and brings interesting smells." She looked at Kale steadily. "Turns out Class 9 apex predators are just animals. And animals make sense, if you pay attention long enough. Kale looked at the three creatures. He looked at the data chips. He looked at Ava. The record, he said at last, was Class 6. Yeah. Ava finally smiled, small, unhurried, the smile of someone who had never needed anyone else to verify what she already knew. You might want to update the chart. She walked past him into the academy, still chewing her ration, jacket torn at the shoulder, absolutely unremarkable in every biological measurement the scanners had on file. Behind her, 3 apex predators sat outside the gate and waited, with the patient, uneasy respect of creatures that had learned, slowly, over 72 surprising hours, that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the wilderness is the one that never stops watching. Some species evolved claws. Humans evolved patience. The galaxy was still learning which was worse.